Chairperson Jim Sawtelle.
Here.
Vice Chairperson Robert Momartz.
Here.
Commissioners Joanne Eaton, Phyllis Harden here, Mark Laces,
Here.
Jerry Malia,
Here.
Jason Reese, sorry.
Here.
Tom Ricker, Anthony Stewart, Planner Fred Fox,
Here.
Attorney Hillary Green, Associate Planner Stephen Williams.
Here.
Has everybody had a chance to take a look at the agenda?
Yes.
And could we have a motion to approve it?
I move to approve the agenda.
Commissioner Laces,
Second it.
Commissioner Momartz, all those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, item 4 on the agenda is appointment of a chairperson and vice chairperson. I know we've been kicking the can down the road on this one for quite a while because we've had a little trouble getting everybody together. Does anybody have any strong feelings one way or the other? Do you want to defer? Do you want to take action on it? Or?
I think that we had the email that was going around earlier about June meetings. I didn't see anybody who wasn't going to be here at the first meeting in June.
Mhm.
Maybe we push it to that.
Yeah, that makes sense.
I don't think everybody said that they were going to be
Right,
here,
but
but I mean,
everybody-
nobody
right.
said that they were not. So, I mean,
Correct.
I'm fine moving till June 7th.
One meeting you were missing.
Yeah, I think that first one in June I'm probably
Okay.
missing.
So
but
the
I-
14th?
You're the 14th?
Which I'm out. but-
Oh, you're out.
Okay.
That's right.
Well, then the 21st?
Yeah.
That's the third.
Yeah.
Can I provide one bit of clarity that I've learned of today and I would have announced later in the meeting? Commissioner Eaton called me today and said that she will be resigning, most, I guess, directly because she is probably going to be moving outside of Superior, so she's regretting to give everybody their notice, but she won't be here for any of those meetings, and I think now that Commissioner Stewart is here, everyone that will be voting on that decision is in attendance, so.
Yeah, I guess that's right, Stephen. I guess we've got everybody then that we're going to have.
I apologize to be late.
No problem. And I think Commissioner Ricker's term is up, coming up in June, as I recall, so.
That's correct as well.
I'm assuming we'll be looking to fill a couple of vacancies anyway, so.
Well, then let's vote.
You guys want to do this? Okay. So I guess the first thing is appointment of a chairperson. Do we have any nominations for chair?
Well, I'd like to nominate current chair, Mr. Sawtelle.
I'll second that.
I'm not sure thank you is in order, gentlemen, but thank you. Do we have any other nominations?
If you want it, you got it.
I just want you guys to know that my term gets up in 2 years, so this will not be a lifetime appointment, so somebody's going to have to grab hold of this gavel at some point.
Well, I think after some of us get some more experience under our belt, we'd feel more comfortable filling shoes like that.
Okay.
I think it's well put.
Well, I guess we have to vote on this, so all those in favor?
Aye.
Okay. Opposed? No. I'll abstain.
Abstain.
Okay. Well, the next item is appointment of a vice chairperson, and it's payback time. Because I think Commissioner Momartz has done a great job of standing in. I've had to miss a fair number of meetings due to my unpredictable schedule, and Commissioner Momartz has been very, very willing to step up, so I would nominate him as vice chair, if he's willing.
Yes, okay.
I'll second.
Okay, all those in favor?
Aye.
Great. Okay, so the next item is public comment on the consent agenda or non-agenda items. Not sure we have anybody here that's looking to do that, but I want to give you the opportunity in case you do. So I guess we can move on then to the public hearing and adoption of a resolution recommending.
Oh, I think we skipped
No.
the.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Consent agenda.
I'm sorry. Thanks. I'm sorry. Yeah, next item is the consent agenda and the minutes of the March 15th, 2016 meeting. I wasn't present. Did anybody have any changes they wanted to make to the minutes?
Did not see any.
Can we have a motion to approve?
I move we approve those minutes from the last meeting.
Okay, second.
Second.
All right, Commissioner Melia, all those in favor? Great.
I wasn't here, so I'll abstain.
Yeah, I think you and I should probably abstain. Okay, good. Now can we move on to the public hearing?
Yes.
Okay. I think that's probably why we have our folks in the audience here. So. The next item on the agenda is a public hearing and adoption of a resolution recommending approval of the final minor subdivision plat and final plat site plan for Rock Creek Ranch, filing number 17C, Block 1, lots 1 through 3, tracks A, B, and C. We'll go ahead and open the public hearing. Public hearing is open. Is there proof of publication?
Yes, I do.
Does the applicant have a presentation they'd wish to make?
Yes.
Please.
Oh, sorry.
If you could just state your name for the folks on the TV.
Good evening. Gary Rohr, 6650 East Ida Avenue, Greenwood Village. Good evening, Mr. Commissioner. Congratulations on your reappointment and Planning Board. We're happy to be here tonight. I'm Gary Rohr with Resolute Investments. Go to the next slide, please. I don't know who has, do I have control of this?
I should be able to do it. There you go.
Thank you. So Resolute Investments, we're out of Centennial. We're a Denver-based company. This is my company. I'm president of the company. This is a medical office building in this picture that we built and delivered last year. We're long-term owners of commercial real estate and some residential real estate, but mostly commercial real estate. We do development, and we end up typically keeping developments that we do for long-term, which is a little bit different from some other developers. We're a very values-based business. All of our decisions come from our values. We tend to work with people that share our values, and all of our developments, we hope, show our values. We influence the real estate built environment for generations to come. We take what we do really seriously. What we do is going to be here for a long time, and our purpose is to create places that enhance the human experience. We really care about the projects that we do. Like I said, they're going to be there a long time, and it's something that, particularly because we own a lot of them long term, is something we take really seriously. Next slide. Okay, this particular piece of ground, as we were driving up here tonight, at Resolute, we end up owning real estate. A lot of times we'll buy land and hold it, sometimes long term, for development as we go through cycles. As we all know, particularly real estate, it's exaggerated sometimes, the up cycles and the down cycles. As I was driving up here and I was thinking about this, we've owned this for 9 years now. Quite a long time to own just a piece of land. That wasn't the plan at first, for sure. So we purchased this property in 2008. It's 8 years. It's coming up on 8 years. When we first purchased this property, you'll see on the next slide, it was because ConocoPhillips had just announced right across the highway over in Louisville, as we all know, a really large project, and we were planning to do an office campus on this property. That was our idea, that we would have some users that were affiliated or associated with the ConocoPhillips project on this site. And it obviously didn't come to pass, although ConocoPhillips didn't announce until 2011, so there's 3 years there or so that we were pursuing a strategy that didn't work. So during that period of time, we pursued all kinds of commercial uses for this property. We have worked really hard on a couple of different hotels, all kinds of really small retail uses, like nothing that would drive development on the site, frankly, but Taco Bell and 7-Eleven, all kinds of really small uses. And we pursued numerous, probably 5 or 6 build-to-suit office opportunities on this site, none of which came to pass. Go to the next slide, please. This is the ConocoPhillips. I already mentioned it. That's the reason we bought it, and it went away. Next slide. So why have we not been able to get office or retail on the site? And we're here to present something very specific tonight, but what I'm doing here, because we haven't done this with you all in some time, we haven't been in front of you in some time, is giving a little bit of perspective on where we've come from on this site. So why haven't we been able to get office done on this site? Well, you can see this is very current information. This is as current as it gets, Q1 2016. The Boulder market, this is sort of the two barbells, if you will, the ends of this northwest corridor market, downtown, Lodo, and Boulder, the vacancy of Class A office in Boulder is 5.9% with a $41 rate. Downtown Lodo, the other end, this is 10% vacancy now, but this number was 4.3% 6 months ago because they delivered two large buildings, speculative buildings were delivered, which added quite a bit of vacancy. But this will be absorbed quickly. I mean, this will be less than 10% in 6 months at a $43 rate. Well, you look up here at this market, 12.5% vacancy, substantially higher, but the rate is what just kills it. I mean, you've got to have a $40 rate to support new construction, and we're not even close, at a $30 rate. It just doesn't. It's a reason we're not seeing new speculative office buildings built up here in this market. The vacancy is too high, the rates are too low. It just doesn't support it today. Next slide. This is going to be hard to read, but this is the same information from CBRE on retail. What's going on in retail. And when we bought this site, if the first thing you would look at when you look at the site, you'd say, oh, retail, because it's across the street from a mall. I mean, a regional fortress mall is right across the street, and on one side, a Walmart on the other side. And if you look at the retail numbers up here, this is really hard to read, but take my word for it, that says 13.7% vacancy. This is the highest vacancy of any retail market in the Denver metro area. Not good. It's the highest vacancy combined with double whammy, the lowest rate, $14.88 lowest rate. Cherry Creek is $56, by the way, which is kind of cool if you're in Cherry Creek. But 14, super low rate. I mean, this rate would have to be $25, $30 to support new construction. It's $14.88 with a lot of vacancy that's still got to be taken up before any of these rates get pushed upward. So, yeah, that's why we haven't got retail done on the site, and that's why we haven't had any success with office. It just doesn't support it in this cycle, and I don't think it will support it in this cycle unless this cycle goes for a really long period of time, much longer than any cycle normally goes. Next slide. I don't want to spend a lot of time on this slide, but I just want to make a point. This is, in 2008, what land did we own, Resolute, that we've been working on since in 2008? And these are some other sites that we owned at the same time, and we've worked now through this recession, or the recovery. We're obviously not in recession anymore. And these are Denver metro properties, which is where most of our properties are. So Denver, Littleton, Centennial, Westminster, down the street, down the turnpike in Westminster, Greenwood Village, Castle Rock, and then this site in Superior. Just want to make the point here that every other project that we owned at that same period of time is completely done. So we have sold land. There's an office building, hotel under construction. We just opened today a Class A self-storage facility in Littleton on a piece of ground we owned there. Centennial, major entitlement done, apartments built, hotel and planning, restaurant, hotel and retail open. This is the southwest corner of 104th and the Turnpike. We assembled that corner in Westminster. Greenwood Village, we built a Class A medical office building. That's that picture I showed you earlier. And Castle Rock says under construction, 83 high-end apartments. These are actually all open now and leased up very successfully in Castle Rock. So we know how to do this, but we just haven't had success here in Superior on this site trying to do commercial. So next slide. So we came to the town board in a planning session meeting, if that's the right term, concept review.
Concept plan, yep.
Concept plan review in October of last year. Excuse me. And we said, basically gave them the same information I just conveyed, although I've updated it tonight. And we said, what we've come to study, and it took us 8 years to get here, but what we've come to figure out is that we need to do some residential on this site. If we can do some residential on this site, we can do commercial on the rest of the site, and it all works in this cycle, and we can get this project done. So in no particular order, just starting over here, these views, if all of you have been up on this site, there's a walking path up here. These views across the site are just spectacular. They're just incredible. I mean, there's unlikely that these views are duplicated or replicated anywhere else around the area, maybe in the Denver metro area. The idea of having floor-to-ceiling windows on, these are high-end townhomes shown on here, for sale product. The idea of having these windows here on the north side, which is the side north and northwest side, which is the side you'd want because you don't have the sun pouring in those windows, with views out over this reservoir, which is beautiful, across to the Flatirons and to Longs Peak, are just stunning. It's a pretty incredible use of the property. And then these townhomes, so these are probably 2 stories is what we're envisioning here, and these townhomes are more like 3 stories, probably with roof decks, which is kind of how some of the stuff gets built today, with some views, again, over the 2-story product in front. So some just amazing views on this site. The residential will clearly work all day long. This high-end townhome project is getting built now in many other parts of the Denver metro area. We have a lot of interest in this product for sure. This will get built in this cycle. Over here, we have a 120-room hotel, which we're under contract with. So we're under contract with a hotel user to build this. They told us and in fact, we've been under contract for a while. We have to get through this process we're talking with you about tonight for them to be able to move forward. So they've got 2 or 3 brands. They're down to the one that they said they have a handshake agreement with right now with Hilton is a Hilton Garden Inn. So it's not completely done yet, but Hilton Garden Inn, which most of us are probably familiar with, but medium to high-end business hotel, which would be a very good hotel in my opinion, and I think it would work all day on this site. It's a really good use for this site in this location. What we talked to the town board about was doing some sort of combination, some mixed use on the site between residential and commercial, and then we can go get it done. I mean, we have to put in the improvements. For example, like if you just do this hotel, you have to put in a water loop all the way across this project. We have to grade the entire project. I mean, we have to plan this entire project at once. You can't just go do a couple acres here or a couple acres here. It's a 13-acre site, and it has to be planned as a 13-acre site. So what we talked to the town board about was this road that goes in would demise the property between commercial uses over here and residential over here. And with that in mind, we can go get this done. They have now gone past their due diligence period, so they're hard with $50,000. We've got to get all this approved, of course, that's a contingency, but they're committed to the site. This will be easy to get done. This will be another hotel. It'll be commercial use, so this will be another hotel or an office building, most likely. We're talking with some people on this site now. I think it will get done in this cycle, but nothing's committed, so I don't want to overstate it. This is committed, and this can get done, no problem in this cycle. So, next slide. This is the hotel. We just got this from them last week. This is them doing some engineering and starting to lay this site out. They're working on their final site plan right now, which would be coming along behind, and we'll talk about that. But this is just the hotel laying out on the site. Next slide. So our path to completion of this whole project, which I'm really excited about after 8 years, is that we presented this to the conceptual site plan meeting in October of last year, and the 7 months since then, we've been working on this final plat and final plat site plan that we're here asking for recommendation of approval on tonight. Really significant amount of engineering work more than anything else. So what we're asking for tonight, and which you've got in your packet, is all of the grading, utilities, the roads, how the roads work, the landscaping all along Colton Road, and the actual platting, the actually separating of the property into the lots. It's sort of the foundation that has to be done before you can build on top of it. So that's what we're asking for, recommendation of approval tonight. In July or August, in about the next 2 months, the hotel developer will be here standing in front of you with their final plat site plan, which is a requirement of them to build. We will likely be in the same meeting or right before, right after them. In conjunction with that, we'll be submit a rezoning for Lot 1, which is the residential lot on this, for a rezone from Regional Activity Center to the R2A to the residential zoning to allow that. Completely a requirement for us that residential piece go so we can develop this whole lot all at the same time. And by the way, this was all zoned R2A originally. The entire site was. There's a lot of history on it, but we'd actually be rezoning it back to what it originally was. And then when all this gets done, by the end of this year, we will be out there installing all this horizontal infrastructure that we're showing you tonight. We'll be out there putting in the roads and the utilities, tying into the retained, actually, if you go to the next slide, tying it, this is actually in, this piece right here is actually in Broomfield, so there's an enormous amount of work that's been done, and staff has been involved with that too, trying to figure out the engineering around this water quality pond that's in Broomfield, because all this entire site goes this way. This reservoir, the spillway around this reservoir, what happens with this reservoir, how does it get filled? It currently gets filled with a ditch that goes across this property like this, which all has to go underground. Tyler Drive, there's an access easement that's negotiated with Bell Flatirons, this big apartment complex, that can allow this even for emergency access. There's a lot of details, is I guess what I'm trying to say, that is already being done and being contemplated. There's a lot of work still to be done, but we're taking it step by step. You'll see us again next month, or about 2 months from now, and we're excited to be on a path to get this done.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Did anybody from the commission have any questions for the applicant? Mr. Reese?
Excuse me. So I have a few questions, and stop me if I go a little bit too far on these, but from one thing that I noticed on Colton Road, from Tyler to Tract A Road, it's a 6-foot wide sidewalk. And then once you go east from Tract A Road to West Flatirons Crossing, you have it reducing to a 5-foot sidewalk. Does that make sense?
Is that along here?
Yeah, so right there, that first section,
Right
from
here.
there, that's currently on your plans is 6 feet wide.
Okay.
Then once you get to that intersection, that is 5 feet wide. Is there a reason that you went to 5 foot?
You're over my pay grade right now. But Chris Barnes is here with Resolute, this is right in his wheelhouse. Let Chris take this one.
I think that might have just gone overlooked. We're happy to put in a 6-foot sidewalk.
Okay.
The sidewalk does taper off to 5 feet, I believe.
It's 8 feet right there at the corner.
At the corner?
Yeah, that's 8 feet right there. Or on the plan, it was 8 feet connector and then.
Okay.
Yeah.
The property, I mean, the Broomfield line is right here, so we don't control anything outside that.
Correct.
And I know that they do kind of narrow down around sidewalk crossings, but
Yeah.
but we did intend for it to be a 6-foot wide sidewalk all the way down Colton Road.
Okay. And then.
It's no issue for us.
Okay.
Yes, I think that was on sheets 4 or 5 that I saw that. On a couple of the sheets, I'll find the locations. On sheet 12 and 13, I don't know which one it is, but on the site sections, you have references for the boundary of Superior and Brighton, which needs to be changed to Broomfield.
Yes, we've got that too.
Okay.
Yep.
And then I think your north arrows are all pointing to the east.
Correct, and that was in the staff comments, and I think that our engineer just hasn't updated that. But during the technical items that we need to correct between now and the time we go to commission, those will all be ironed out.
Perfect. And then the retaining wall,
Yes.
looking at that, the material was going to be either precast concrete or poured-in-place concrete or the paved stone or the locking blocks.
Correct.
I think a lot of the retaining walls in the area, whether they're in Broomfield or Superior, a lot of them have flagstone or a different type of material. And I'd like to see that the possibility of us kind of keeping that theme throughout the area. I don't know. But then also, if you look at the retaining wall that holds back all the soil by level 3, that is that paved stone retaining wall, it's failed drastically over the last couple of years, and I just want to make sure that that's taken into consideration as well. I think I'd prefer the concrete, the stamped concrete, or something that looks a little bit better, is a little more structurally sound. But that'd be my one comment about the retaining wall.
Yeah, it's a good comment. I haven't seen the flagstone retaining walls, but this wall is in the process. If we get approval here tonight, we'll have it structurally engineered. And a lot of it depends on how the hotel situates on the site. But that will all be anticipated and given through our construction documents moving forward.
Good.
But that would be a concern for us as much as it is for you.
Okay.
And thank you for your attention to detail.
Anybody else have any questions or comments?
I've got one real quick for Gary. A couple times you mentioned in this cycle. What exactly is this cycle? What dates are you looking at? You want 12 months? What's your cycle?
That's a really good question. I don't know, is the answer. I would guess that we're in the seventh inning, something like that, of a 9-inning game. I mean, we're getting near the end of the cycle. It's been about 8 years, and that's a normal cycle. So if it went 10 years, that'd be 2 years longer than a normal cycle. It feels like it has a lot of momentum as long as people keep moving to Colorado, which they clearly still are. So we're in a good place. The seventh inning is still, things are going well. But I think for us to extrapolate 5 more years, for example, of up would be kind of silly. I don't see that happening. So I would guess that this is what we can get done in this cycle. To say that it's going to last a lot longer, we can do something different than this, I wouldn't make that bet.
So as one of the other slides you'd shown was kind of a timeline of this
Jerry,
meeting.
you should like
Sorry. Sorry about that, fellas. In one of your earlier slides, you had a kind of a timeline of this meeting and future meetings that are going to happen, and it looked like you were, ballparking, expecting construction to begin at the end of 2016.
That's right.
Beginning of 2017.
That's right.
How long from that point do you think? What would happen first? Probably the hotel.
The hotel and the residential, I think, will go at the same time.
Same time?
Yeah, same time.
So how? 2 years? to complete
Well,
that
I think
construction?
in 2017 we'll have this hotel. This hotel will be under construction in 2017 and finishing at the end of 2000 or very close. By the end of 2017 this will be open or about open, and in 2017 I would guess that this project will be a third built. I mean, it'll be phased in. They don't just go build it all at once, obviously, but there'll be models open and all of that here or here. There'll be models open, and they'll be building, units. This will be a third build out. They'll be on their way to building out the rest of it in 18, 19, and be done. So this will all be happening next year. This will be happening next year. This is the only wild card, and my guess is we'll have something going on here as well. But this might be the only piece that goes over to the next cycle, just because they don't have anything for sure on it right now.
Thank you.
Just to follow up on Commissioner Malia's question about the cycle. So how long exactly is a typical cycle? Is it about 10 years? Is that in your opinion? And is it a 10-year cycle and then a period of retraction? And how long is that typically?
So all real estate cycles go recession, recovery, expansion, oversupply, back to recession. They're those 4 same components over and over, no exception in the history of the world so far. But the length of each one of those cycles is different from recession to recession, and the depth or height of those trough or peaks and valleys is different. So nobody knows is the answer, which is not a very comfortable answer if you're sitting in your seat or standing here, either one. But about 8 years is usually a length of a cycle. We're in pushing a 6-7 year cycle right now. So historically, we've probably got another year or two. This one feels like it has more legs than that. I would guess 2-3 more years, but I wouldn't guess 5 more years.
Okay.
And it's purely a guess because it's in the future. Don't know.
And then one more question regarding the vacancy rates and square footage numbers that you posted. What in your research and in the materials that you considered in looking at the market really explains, I guess, the vacancy challenges that the Northwest Corridor is really experiencing versus the rest of the Denver metro area?
They're a little bit different. So the retail is that it just got drastically overbuilt up here. It got drastically overbuilt around the mall, and retail is really changing because of the internet. So the Best Buy there is slated to close, for example, as I understand it. That's the word on the street for example. They're closing a couple of Best Buys in Colorado. That's one of them, as I understand it.
I think it already closed.
In Broomfield, okay. And it's just retail. The nature of retail has changed. We just all shop differently than we did before, and it's just really overbuilt up here. So it'll be okay up here, but it's going to take a while to fix. The office market, the office brokers say there's some kind of phenomenon going on that people want to be in downtown Lodo because of everything going on there, and Union Station renovation and light rail and multimodal transportation, or they want to be in Boulder, and they seem to have kind of bypassed this corridor for now. But as we're seeing really low vacancies in those corridors, it'll come back here, but it hasn't happened yet in this cycle. I mean, it may be sort of a really slow cycle this time. We may have to wait until next time to see a lot more office buildings built in the northwest corridor.
Thank you.
Okay, any other comments?
I just have a question, and maybe I missed this, but what is the relationship between Resolute Investment Corp. and Rock Creek Development, Inc.?
So Rock Creek Resolute Investments is my company. It's the development company. We're a management company. We put together a single asset entity that owns every one of the properties that we own. So when we go around, we hand out Resolute cards. That's us. Rock Creek Development is me and one other investor that owns that land. So Rock Creek Development, Inc. actually owns the parcel and is developing the parcel. It's related. We're the same group.
Okay, great. Thanks for clarifying that. I did have one other question about additional housing in that area and how it would impact current infrastructure in Superior and Rock Creek, and are there plans to either expand that or address the additional needs that will be caused by additional housing?
When you say infrastructure, you mean utilities, for example?
Utilities, exactly. And you addressed the roads, but will that be sufficient to accommodate the additional housing there and what looks to be a two-lane road in and out of the development?
So have we done traffic yet on this? Have we done traffic studies yet? So we've done traffic studies here that show, and for example, this housing probably has less traffic counts than comparable office buildings would, for example. We have a lot more people going in and out a day than you have going in and out of houses, for example. But yes, we've done a traffic study that shows that the roads, we're not adding additional high service levels on the additional roads that are there, et cetera. I mean, that's all contemplated in the traffic studies that have been done. And the utilities as well. The utilities have been sized. We know the utilities. We know the connections. There's enough capacity in all those utilities, et cetera. So yes, that's all been part of the engineering that's been done.
Thank you.
Is there, excuse me, is there an access point right there between Lot 2 and 3? Is it coming off of Colton?
We're showing a possible right in, right out here. I don't know. Are we addressing that right now? Yeah. So yes, this is a right in, right out. This is there's a median that exists here, so we couldn't turn left eastbound on Colton if we wanted to. But this is a right in, right out. This is a 3/4.
Sure. And then at the top of the hotel lot, you would have access to that as a...
Right here.
Okay.
Yes, off of this road.
Sure.
Any other questions?
I just want to clarify that staff does have a presentation prepared for this, and that while Gary has given a very good broad overview of his kind of long-term proposal, Fred has a presentation prepared to kind of clarify the nuances of what's actually being proposed tonight, so that we don't confuse the two. No residential developments proposed now. This is strictly, as Gary couched it, horizontal infrastructure, final development, or final plan, site plan. So.
Okay, well, if there are no more questions to Gary, we'll go ahead and have the staff presentation at this time.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, I'm Fred Fox, the consulting town planner. And some of these slides we'll go through hopefully a little quickly because they've introduced enough information. I don't want to double up on information. So I think everybody understands where this site is located, Colton Road and West Flatiron Crossing. The idea is to set up this 3.6 acre parcel into 3 lots and 3 tracks. And this site is being platted over. The old plat would be for filing, Rock Creek filing 17B. This one is filing 17C. Okay. So it's further defining in the old plat that included what used to be called Simpson Housing or Horizons. It's now called Bell Horizons. That and Autry Reservoir. And in your packet in the staff report, there's a little bit more history about the zoning jumping back and forth. I think what we had was this whole area was dual zoned. So it had both R2A as well as RAC. And so it was initially dual zone. Then Simpson Housing decided that RAC for this site was a little bit too much. So they were afraid of that. And so they rezoned it to CAC. And then the Resolute came along later and rezoned it back to RAC. We still will need a PD amendment to fix the zoning for the residential part. And the applicant's already mentioned that. Next slide. This is the old plat, 17B. Basically, we're going to cut the 3 lots and the 3 parcels out of this site right here. We're going to leave, right now, this easement's going to stay. It's the irrigation easement. It's actually a ditch, and that's how they help fill Autry Reservoir from time to time as it's needed. This easement back here is an access easement. Will go away except for the portion of it up here, so they can have access to the pond, and they won't need this old access anymore for access to the pond because it'll come off of this street and then to the south. Another thing that'll stay in this old plat is this access is a trail access to Autry Reservoir. So we'll talk a little bit more about the pedestrian connectivity through the site, even with this particular replat. But this one will stay, so folks in here can get the Autry Reservoir up at this point. We'll also maintain the access and utility easement, which from Connor Way. In fact, this developer will develop the street up to the water line where they connect in. They will pave that. What this easement in here is for Connor Way is an access easement, public utilities, as well as EVA, emergency vehicle access. Right now, Bell Friedeyers has some bollards across the street, and it'll be up to basically the town working with the applicant here to work with Bell Friedeyers to see once this infrastructure is put in right here, as to whether that's going to be then a normal access or if it's going to stay in EVA. But both Connor Way and Tyler Drive are private streets, so Bell Friedeyers is key to getting that opened up for a clear access, as far as we're concerned at this point. But we're only concerned with what's happening here. There is some off-site work that'll have to be done with the new plat. So we'll go to the next one. Next one is an overview of filing 17C, what we're really here in business for tonight. Block 1 will stay as Block 1, but now we've got Lot 1 going up all the way up here. So let's get a fairly large lot where they were showing what they propose possibly in the future as multifamily. We have Tract A, which is the street. This street will have up on this sheet, I think in your documents, there's a cross-section of the street. The whole easement is 45 feet wide. The street is 26 feet flow line to flow line. And then there's a 9-foot tree lawn and sidewalk on each side of this street, which will be done later, but at least it's within the easement for Tract A. Tract A is actually the street, but the easement is outside of that, if you can follow me on that. The easement's wider than the street, put it that, the paved street. So that will then allow for the sidewalk and the tree lawn along both sides of the street. This is Tract B. Tract B, well, this is Lot 2, and this is Lot 3. So there we got the 3 lots. This is Tract B. The pond is in here, but it needs to be expanded a bit and worked on, and that means it'll slop over into Tract B. And so at the finished state, the pond will be within this whole area in here. There's This thing here, they defines an area there's a navigation easement over this portion of the whole site. That was done when they platted Rock Creek years ago. And it has to do with the airport. And it's called a navigation easement that everybody knows that the planes fly over here. And if there's a problem, the airport's there and the airlines are not liable for that. So everyone knows that there's these navigation easements. This is a piece that's not there. That's going to go away in terms of, this is not part of the navigation easement. The rest of it is out here. Parcel C is way up here. Small piece. That's called a director's parcel. And the director's parcel is for the Metro District. It's called Colton Metro District that Resolute has set up to manage the maintenance and development of all of the horizontal structure, the open space, things like that. And so that in order for a Metro District to have standing in the area that it serves, it has to have ownership in a piece of the property. So there's a very small piece right here. This is what tract C is. So you got A, tract B, tract C, lot 1, lot 2, lot 3. Okay? Next one. This is a larger view of the plat. Basically, this plat looks like the outside boundary looks like a hiking boot from my perspective, but at any rate, over here at the toe and more under the end step of the thing, this is lot A, or lot 1. And the main thing going on here is that the easements are enlarged, and this one is maintained, the irrigation easement, but not much else is going on in this particular end of the plat. Go to the next one. Here we can see much of the continuance of lot 1 all the way up to here, and the various tract C here, tract B here, lots 3, 2, and 1. And the continuing of the wider easements all the way to the edge of lot number 3. The other thing on this one is that in terms of the Colton Road, basically town of Superior is in control of half of it. So we're able to so the developer will be able to get all the work done that whatever is needed along Colton Road, under our jurisdiction. You don't run into Broomfield until you cross over the line. And and then Superior's control goes all the way to the edge, to the end of tract B. And from that point on, all of this is Broomfield over in here. Next slide. Primary access for this lot then is going to be tract A, right here. Secondary access is right here and it can serve both lots 2 and 3. We don't have they have access over here. They need to work with Bell Flatirons on where that access might be, but on the plat it doesn't actually show an actual access. This is the access and a utility easement, a wide one here that includes Connor Way, as well as getting that street down to their street, which is in tract A, and then on out to the signalized intersection right here. There's a number of conditions in the staff report that relate to that intersection of things that they need to do with the city of Broomfield to beef up not so much the geometry of the intersection, but the signalization of it. Once again, this is the drainage pond, and an element that was brought up previously of the drainage pond is the retaining wall. And as you are aware, that has not been engineered completely yet. We will be getting, as part of a condition, we will have to have that done before they get any permits for construction. So there's a little bit of time, but on the other hand, I think they want to get it done sooner rather than later. So there's not a lot to say about the retaining wall from an engineering standpoint, but it's a significant wall. It's 12 feet, but it's not as big as the one over there in Broomfield. But it's a significant wall, and it'll take some good, solid engineering to make sure that thing doesn't fail over time. Next slide. let's see. This is a signage and plan sheet. Basically, we talked about, or was mentioned before, that this is really a 3/4 access here, and so it's signed appropriately. In other words, you got a right in, a right out, and a eastbound left in. There is no left out there, okay? This access would be, that was mentioned before also, is only a right in, right out, but this is a full access right here. And it's signalized. So if you want to go, or at this point with the plan, if you want to go eastbound on Colton Road, you need to get to this point. If they develop this other lot 1, and get an access out onto Tyler, then there will be an ability to go that direction and get an eastbound. I believe you'll be able to take an eastbound turn, a left turn, to get onto eastbound to Colton. Let's see here. The circulation for pedestrians is quite good, actually. There's sidewalks on both sides of Colton, and once this road is developed, as they carry on with development and get sidewalks on both sides of the street, it'll go all the way up to this point here, up in this neck of the woods, and then this south side sidewalk will cross, and then go up here and you grab onto the sidewalk that is already in place right here. Then it goes north to US 36 Bikeway, or south to the mall, or on down this way. So, and then the other connection is to the Autry Reservoir path, is all through here. So there's really good pedestrian circulation, and there will be in the future once this thing is completed. This was the drainage plan. Basically, all the drainage is, as has been mentioned, is draining to the I call it the southeast, and it along in here as it gets towards the Colton Road, it gets into a pipe. Here it gets up along the road here, and is directed up in this direction here, and it gets into a pipe. And these are the discharge points right now that are in Track B, in what we call Track B. They're right here, and that's the discharge points for the pond. So this is, I think, not only is it a water quality pond, but it's also a detention pond. But it feeds into the whole system. And this has been looked at by Broomfield, and we're pretty square with them on that. This section shows the wall. We've already talked about this, but it can have almost a maximum of 11 to 12 feet at the highest point. There will be a guardrail on top, and that'll be a metal guardrail. And this will be engineered and have to pass muster with our Public Works Department. Next slide. Overview of the landscape plan. Yeah, there we go. This is basically the town has asked this developer to finish the landscaping all along Colton Road and all the way to West Flatiron Crossing. The sidewalk already exists right here to this point, but right now there's no sidewalk in here, and there's no landscaping. When you cross Tyler Drive, you end up having some landscaping, whatever, along the south end of Bell Horizons. So this is very nice to have done, because we get this done. We're basically looking sharp, with the others, like the Broomfield across the way. I mean, as you get close, as you go down here in Broomfield, it gets even, their setbacks are quite wide. A lot of landscaping, probably more than they need, but at any rate, we get this done. And this landscaping in here is expanded in terms of design on the next sheet. Basically, we're going to run a tree row all along Colton Road. It's going to be interspersed with shrub areas and turf in different areas, if you looked at it closely, as well as some flagstone elements, which kind of sort of separate some of these shrub areas that are interspersed with the trees. The trees are a variety of different trees. They're not, in Broomfield, they're pretty much a single tree. It's a white flowered one on the south side. Here on our side, we're going to have some variation of that, but basically a row of deciduous trees all the way along Colton Road to West Flatiron Crossing. Next slide. We went too fast?
I don't think we went too fast, but was there another?
Well, anyway, that's pretty much, I don't think I need, you can look at that landscape plan, whatever, it was fairly detailed. And I personally think it'd be quite nice for us to have that done. So I think I've mentioned all the important attributes of this, probably spending too much time, but at any rate, the proposal is fairly straightforward and meets the requirements for a project of this nature. Staff is here to answer your questions, and the applicant is here to make or answer any more questions that might come up in your discussion.
All right. Thanks, Fred.
The only thing I'd like to clarify, just so that everyone, I guess, gets credit for it, the town, this is a gateway into the town coming in from Broomfield, and the town did request that we had an easement given to us for an entryway sign, and Resolute was kind enough to grant that, so that's part of this application as well.
Good to know. Did the commission have any questions for town staff?
Go ahead.
I was going to say, and you beat me to it, is that I think that's an important element to this entire development, is having that town sign, because coming in from Broomfield, it took me years to understand that that was Superior, that, you know, having that vacant land, I didn't know where Broomfield ended and where Superior started until I really started paying attention to the public hearings and everything. So I think it's along with the landscaping, it's going to be a great entry point for our town.
I agree. One question I have for staff is staff's opinion on the consistency of this application with the existing Rock Creek Ranch PD. I believe that's one of the conditions that we need to find for approval, and I'd just like to hear what staff's opinion is on the consistency with the existing zoning.
Well, the existing zoning is RAC, which is, but there's no allowance in that zone district for multifamily. So that's why they're going to need to deal with that issue as part of the development they want to eventually build. But in terms of the lots 2 and 3, they're zoned RAC, and so that's in conformance. Hotel, it's good to go.
Okay.
And that zone district is for large scale, taller buildings, commercial in nature. That's what RAC is. And so it's in conformance with that. We also did a small thing. We looked through the design guidelines and or what they call performance criteria in the Rock Creek FDP, and found that they initially proposed, and I failed to mention this, but they do have streetlights. There will be streetlights on Tract A for that street, but there's no landscaping. So the streetlights in Rock Creek are supposed to be no more than 20 feet high, and they had a 30-foot pole, so we told them they needed to have a 20-foot pole, things like that. So we did look at the performance criteria, and it's the west side of this thing, and particularly Lot 1, if they develop it into residential, it's very compatible with Bell Horizons, which is continues to the west. We don't control what's below us, what's south of here in Broomfield, and it's of course commercial all the way along Colton Road, all the way to Rock Creek Parkway. So in that sense, it's very compatible with that.
I guess I'd also clarify that this application is just for the subdivision, which will create the lots, and then the horizontal infrastructure, which is just making this area more developable. So there's no guarantee that Lot 1 develops residentially or gets rezoned to be residential. The applicant is taking this step forward to move towards that direction, and they got a general I guess consensus from the board, or at least the majority from the board when they brought their concept plan forward, that was something that they would support. But this is not establishing anything use-wise, so they don't necessarily have to develop those lots as residential. They don't necessarily need to develop the commercial ones as hotels. That'll all be vetted through future final plat site plans.
Thank you.
Thanks, Steve. Any other questions or comments for staff? No?
One of the other questions that I had, and thank you for that question, I think that was a great question. But I'd like to also ask if, how ownership is going to work on this, since there are some issues with Broomfield kind of spilling over into part of the property, and also the lots that once developed will look like they can be sold separately. So how will ownership on all of that work?
I mean, I can give you a general stab at what I'm expecting, but the developer might be able to provide more clarification. They're basically developing pad-ready sites. So in the future, you know, what would happen was probably they're going to sell, once they have this pad-ready, you know, lots 2 and 3, which are commercial lots or intended to be commercial lots, they'll probably just sell to the hotel developer who will come in, and so Hilton or whoever their owner would own lot 3, and then a future either office space as proposed or a hotel owner would own lot 2. What we'd see for lot 1 to develop as residentially is probably another subdivision plat to create individual lots for those parcels, and then we'd have individual ownership for each of those individual lots, unless, you know, it's condominiumized or something like that. But I would anticipate a future subdivision and then individual lots for each residence that sits on lot 1. So lot 1 is big and broad and conceptual at this point, but it would need a future major subdivision in order to develop, or in order to subdivide it into individual lots for residential owners. Does that answer your question?
That does, and I think that the developer did have some additional comments in it.
Just that Tract A and Tract B will be owned in perpetuity by the Metro District, and those will be maintained by the Metro District. So there will be continuity with all 3 landowners having one place to point for Tract A and Tract B maintenance.
Great, okay. Thank you.
Any further questions?
Yeah, I do have one other question, I'm sorry. So in terms of what we're here to do tonight, it would be okay for us to move forward with this, knowing that final development or final proposal for development is not on the table right now, that what we're looking at tonight is developing these plats and putting in infrastructure for these plats. Is that correct?
That is correct. So similar applications came through for the first 2 phases of infrastructure for the Superior Town Center. So FDP1 Phase 1 and FDP1 Phase 2 were strictly horizontal infrastructure. So this isn't the first time the town's done something like this.
The same thing was done for the marketplace. To plat some of the major streets, get that done with some of the lots. And then after that, Costco was built on a lot, and they had a street they could get in and out on.
Thank you. That answers my question.
Final questions?
I got one question for you, Fred. You had mentioned a navigation easement.
Yep.
What is there mechanics to that? Is there anything to that easement?
The navigation easement covers most of the site, as I understand it.
Is there any equipment?
And it doesn't include this box over here. And it might have had something to do with the fact that that was a director's parcel for the old Metro District, Rock Creek Metro District. But that's gone. That part has gone away. The town board is basically the board for the Metro District, so it doesn't. That doesn't need to stay. It never was part of the navigation easement, but the rest of it's over here. And it's an easement that the airport insisted on when we platted Rock Creek, that they didn't stand any liability for an airplane crashing into somebody's house. It's about what it boils down to. In other words, you know that there is an airport here, that there are flyovers all the time, and you don't have the standing with this easement, theoretically, that if a plane fell on your house or your building or whatever, that you couldn't sue. That's about what it boils down to.
Okay. Thank you.
Mm-hmm. And that was laid out on various areas of Rock Creek. Some are more vulnerable to a fall down than others, like up south of Colton Road particularly.
Any other questions? Okay, is there anyone from the audience who wishes to comment? Doesn't seem to be. Any final rebuttal from the applicant?
No, thank you for hearing us out tonight, and we appreciate being here.
All right, thank you. Okay, since there is no further comment, the public hearing is closed. Comments from the commission? Anybody have any thoughts that they want to share?
I'm excited to see a weed-infested lot be developed in a smart manner. I think it'll be great to have a gateway sign, and I'm excited to see this built out.
Anyone else?
I'd be interested in seeing the drawings of the hotel once that gets further down the road with the actual schematics of the building, because like we said, it's the entrance into Superior, and so that as a multi-story building is going to be very visible from well down the street. So it'd be interesting to see that as that comes to fruition, as like the hallmark driving into Superior.
Yeah. Anyone else? I guess I would just echo the comments here. I think it looks like it's, has the potential to be a really nice project. The multifamily units you're looking at putting up, I mean, the views are just breathtaking. It's going to be beautiful. So appreciate you coming in here and answering our questions. So if there's nothing further, I guess we would entertain a motion to approve the resolution of the Planning Commission. Rather than having me read this, does anybody care to make a motion?
I'll make a motion to approve Town of Superior Planning Commission Resolution Number PC-6, Series 2016. A resolution of the Planning Commission of the Town of Superior recommending approval of the final minor subdivision plat and final plat site plan for Rock Creek Ranch filing number 17C, Block 1, lots 1 to 3, tracks A, B, and C.
Thank you. We have a
some
motion. Do we have a
conditions.
second?
I'll second.
Commissioner Reese?
I'm sorry, you did.
Commissioner Reese?
Thank you.
Any further discussion?
You understand that acceptance or resolution, that there's conditions in here, and so your motion includes those?
Yeah, I think we would, maybe a friendly amendment to the motion, subject to all the conditions stated in the resolution that we have before us, including sections 1, 2, and 3.
Right.
Yes.
With that clarification, any further comment? All those in favor?
Aye.
Okay, motion's carried. Thank you. Okay, we'll try to keep moving here, folks. The next item is another public hearing. And I think I go ahead and gavel this to open. Public hearing on agenda item 8. Public hearing and adoption of a resolution recommending approval of subdivision plat and final development plan, Superior Medical Building and Parking Garage, Lot 1, Block 12, Superior Town Center, case number FP and FDP 201602. Is there proof of publication of the hearing? Thank you, fellas.
Yes, I do.
Does the applicant have a presentation it would like to make?
I think we're going to let Stephen present first.
Okay, that sounds good. Staff care to make a presentation?
Sure. Stephen Williams, staff planner. As stated, this application is for a final plat and final development plan for the Superior Medical Building and proposed garage. Superior Medical Investors requests approval of both the final subdivision plats and final development plan for Lot 1, Block 12 of the Superior Town Center. The subdivision request is required to divide Lot 1 into Lots 1A and 1B, and the FDP request is required to develop each of the two lots as follows. The applicant is proposing to construct a roughly 62,000 square foot medical office building on Lot 1A and a 90,000 square foot four-level parking garage on Lot 1B. The front of the medical office building is illustrated at the top of this slide, and the front of the parking garage is illustrated below. Both are designed to face south. As clarified in the applicant's project narrative, Lot 1, Block 12 is currently owned by RC Superior, the master developer of the town center. Superior Medical Investors is acting as the applicant. They intend to develop both properties and then acquire Lot 1. Lot 1B would be retained by RC Superior and eventually transferred to the town's metro district for maintenance. Lot 1, Block 12 is located in Planning Area 2 of the Superior Town Center. As this map illustrates, it's located on the eastern border of the town center along Highway 36. It's also just north of the Boulder Valley Ice Building that has been constructed. The medical office building was originally actually approved through that Boulder Valley Ice final development plan and designed to be a part of that larger building. The current proposal is being processed as a new final development plan because of the extent of the proposed changes, the inclusion of the parking garage, and the varying ownership that now exists among these parcels. The owners of the Boulder Valley Ice Building have committed to updating their final development plan application to remove the medical office building should this application be approved. The applicant's subdivision plat drawing is shown here. The line in red shows the current configuration of Lot 1, Block 12. The applicant's subdivision request qualifies as a minor subdivision, which involves dividing the property in two and the dedication of several easements, which we'll cover. The subdivision request essentially is to carve out Lot 1B, which is shown in blue. It's a 0.6 acre parcel from the original lot in order to allow the proposed parking garage to be developed on its own site. Lot 1A, consequently, shown in white, would wrap around the southern and eastern portions of Lot 1B and contain the remaining 0.95 acres. In addition to creating two lots, the subdivision request includes 7 easement dedications that are generally illustrated in yellow and detailed in staff's narrative. So the 3 that concern the medical office building are shown here. It's a 5-foot utility easement. It gets wider here as it goes north, but it's a 5-foot width that's being proposed on the north, and that's to accommodate utility lines. There's another utility easement that's proposed in this southeastern corner, and that's to accommodate their irrigation line. They're also proposing an easement here that stems off from this area in orange is an existing 30-foot wide utility and access easement, so they're stemming some of their utilities from the south. The other ones shown here are actually coming from Superior Drive and already existing. So the other easements within Lot 1A, this is for a fire hydrant, and this one's actually a fire line that's to serve the Boulder Valley Ice Building to the south. As they concern Lot 1B, there's a utility easement that's proposed in the southwest corner here, and then an access easement that would get folks from this access drive into the proposed parking garage. As clarified in staff's memo, a handful of adjustments to these easements will be required to align this plat with what's proposed on the utility plan that's part of the final development plan. Additionally, the proposed development relies on a few off-site easements that are also shown on that utility plan that will need to be accommodated by separate easement dedications. This subdivision plat can only accommodate easements shown within the subject boundaries of the parcels that are included, so separate easement dedications will be required, and those are all covered in staff's memo. The other easement that currently exists on this property that we'll cover later is shown in green here. This is a drainage, utility, and access easement that affects the eastern boundary. The FDP portion of this application clarifies how the two lots, the proposed lots, would be developed. The medical office building shown in yellow would be sited on the northwest portion of Lot 1A, and the proposed parking garage shown in blue would cover the majority of Lot 1B. Portions of the medical office building would have a 0 setback along Superior Drive to the west. The building would also be set back 5 feet from the northern property line to accommodate that easement that we stated earlier. The MOB's southern setback varies. At the closest point, it would sit 39.5 feet from the southern property line, and that's here where this property line jogs to the north. The distance from the medical office building to the proposed garage, which sits on its property line, is 10 feet. Other setbacks from the parking garage to the east and to the south are less than 2 feet, and then it's 15 feet to the north for the parking garage. As designed, these two lots would rely on one another to satisfy certain development requirements, including parking and landscaping. To satisfy parking, a shared parking agreement between the two property owners will be provided to staff before a certificate of occupancy could be issued for the medical office building. Medical office building requires 188 spaces, and they're proposing to accommodate 28 via surface parking, and then they'll accommodate the remainder within the parking garage, which in total would accommodate 244 spaces. If approved, this FDP would address the landscaping needs of both lots. As the landscaping proposed largely falls on Lot 1A, its owners would be responsible for maintenance, and we'll get into those details later too. The medical office building is proposed to face south towards the primary access drive. The main building entrance is proposed to be located in the southeastern corner, shown here. There would be another secondary entrance located in the southwestern corner over here. The decision for this primary entrance is that it's in close proximity to the parking garage, which will accommodate much of its parking space, and it's also in close proximity to the majority of the surface parking spaces that are proposed. Secondary building access points are also shown here to attach with the parking garage. There's 3 sky bridges that are proposed on levels 2, 3, and 4. And Lot 1A, as I stated, is also proposed to include the 28 parking spaces to the south, 2 of which are handicap van accessible. The other thing that this is kind of showing is that and it's not quite as easy to see here, but there's a 26-foot wide access easement that's required, and due to the configuration of this parking lot and the needed parking spaces, this access easement falls just outside of the already established 30-foot wide access easement, so they need 26 feet wide of paved access for fire access, and they're going to need to expand this easement on their property, so that's one of the plat updates that's required. And then one of the separate easement dedications is that that 26-foot wide access easement needs to run across Lot 2A here. So the owners of Boulder Valley Ice will also need to expand the existing easement as it affects their property by it's just over a foot in order to accommodate that 26-foot wide required fire access easement. The parking garage, which covers most of Lot B, will also be oriented to the south. The vehicle access entry point is in the southeast corner, shown here. This drawing also illustrates the portion of the proposed location of parking spaces, drive aisles, handicap parking, stairways, and an elevator, as well as pedestrian pathways within Lot 1, or Level 1 of the parking garage. Layouts of levels 2, 3, 4 are fairly comparable. 59 parking spaces are proposed on Level 1, all of which are oriented north and south, as you can see. And access by drive aisles that vary in width from 20 to 22 feet. Stairways are proposed on the northwest corner and the northeast corner, and an elevator flanks the stairway in the northwest corner. Pedestrian pathways are also generally illustrated to show how users of the garage can get to these stairways and elevators, and they're shown on the interior of the parking garage. Staff has recommended that those access points be established outside of the footprint of the access or of the parking garage in order to provide a better buffer between the vehicles and the pedestrians that are using those access points. But this would only satisfy that buffer on Level 1, as the same access routes are needed on Levels 2, 3, and 4. So finally, the area in yellow here gets to the other existing easement that I mentioned earlier. It's an existing drainage, utility, and access easement. And there's a 60-inch storm line that runs right through the corner of this property, or it's already there, so the corner of the property is proposed to be built over it. In order for this northeast corner of the parking structure to encroach into this easement, staff is requiring a separate encroachment agreement between the town and the owner of the parking garage, and that this agreement will have to be prepared and considered by the town board concurrent with its application. This meeting will go forward to the town board at some point in June. Staff has also applied condition D to this approval to verify the condition of the line before construction occurs, so they'll need to excavate the line and ensure that it's properly filled underneath before anything gets built over it. This contact maps was included at the request of staff to provide some broader context for how lots 1A and 1B will relate with one another and connect to surrounding parcels. Vehicle access to these lots will originate from Superior Drive and largely utilize the 30-foot existing easement that we mentioned will need to be widened slightly. Additionally, the southern 14 feet of this access easement currently serves as, so the southern 14 feet of this drive currently serves as fire access for the property to the south, and that access will need to be maintained throughout construction. So a note's been added, a condition's been added that a note be added to the plan to clarify that that access is available throughout the construction period. And then these dashed lines generally clarify proposed pedestrian routes through the property, so everybody can get out to Superior Drive. There's 3 points of crossing across this access point, one of which is within Superior Drive. But the connectivity here is critical. It even goes all the way out to the US 36 Bikeway. But this proposed parking garage is detailed more in staff's recommendation or staff's memo. Will be a public parking garage and will serve the public. So it'll be critical that they can get out to the town center, and then most likely the other beneficiary for this parking garage will be the Boulder Valley Ice Building, so the connections to the property to the south are important and have been established. The applicant's utility plan clarifies where the existing utilities lie and how the proposed developments will tie into them. We kind of covered this already with easements within the plat. This plan also illustrates the neat reason modifications, as I mentioned before. An example of this is an electrical transformer. Actually, this is the drainage plan. I'm getting ahead of myself. I apologize. The applicant's drainage plan clarifies where the majority of the drainage will flow, which is to the south. So there's a 60-inch storm drain line within this easement that's already established. So most of the surface drainage or the roof drainage will flow to the south and then be piped to the east to Track D, which is a detention facility. This little pathway in between is proposed to flow to the north and then into the detention facility that exists directly to the north. Staff is generally supportive of the overall plan. They have requested that this manhole be removed to a different location so that servicing this manhole does not impact access to the building. So the applicant needs to explore alternative locations or illustrate to town satisfaction that relocation is not feasible. Additionally, staff is requiring that excavation that I mentioned earlier. So note on this plan sheet will be added for both of those conditions. And then, as I was stating earlier, the utility plan generally illustrates the easements that are necessary, and this one shown as an example is off the property. So this is where they're proposing to put their electrical transformer, and they show a 5-foot utility easement that needs to be established across Track C, as well as across Super Lot to the north. We already mentioned the other easement, one other easement dedication that would be required from Lot 2A in order to get that 26-foot wide paved access that's required for fire. So other dedications of those type affect Parcel H, which is also owned by RC Superior, but essentially there is an easement that gets utilities partway across Parcel H, which separates Lot 1A from the right-of-way within Superior Drive, and those partial utility easements need to be extended to connect to the building in order for those easements to be viable. And then finally getting into probably what you guys are all wanting to see, are the elevations of the structure. The proposed elevations for the medical office building reflect a variety of building materials, colors, heights, and facade articulation and relief. The front of the building, as I mentioned, will face south. So this is that primary entrance that we're showing. These are those 3 skywalks that are proposed to connect to the parking garage to the east. The other entrance point here on the south side is in the southwest corner along Superior Drive. Additionally, what they're showing here are 2 25 square foot sign bands above each entrance. And then there are some awnings that are also helping to identify the building entrances. The other thing that defines these buildings are the kind of the distinct colors for all the corners of the buildings, the columns that are shown on both the south and east, or the south and west elevations, excuse me, and then a fair amount of brick kind of central to the to each facade is shown on each of these elevations as well. This is the elevation that would face Superior Drive. Secondary access points really for, I think, workers and maybe loading of supplies is provided here. You can see that there is a grade change here, so there are some, I think it's a ramp that gets you down to these doors, and then there's some steps or stairway as shown on their floor plans internal to those locations. But this would be a secondary, probably just employee type of access. So the things here, I guess, to keep in mind are that generally this meets requirements from the governing PD. There are a few exceptions that they're requesting as they apply to these 2 facades. The 25 square feet for the sign bands meet the size requirements, but they're they're at a height that's a little bit in excess of what the PD allows. The PD's design guidelines stipulate that those are supposed to be at the base of the second floor or lower. These heights are shown above the second floor. So that's one exception that they're requesting. The other exception, or the more major exception, is that they're showing a building height that's in excess of the 55-foot limit within the town center. In this location, they're showing between 58 feet and 62 feet. So they're requesting an exception to get up to that 62 feet in this location. And that's something that we can consider and approve as well. Staff generally doesn't have any concerns about a height exception in this location due to the fact that it is along the eastern border of the property, and the only thing on the other side of it is the parking garage. So there's no real views that are being blocked in this location. And the applicant's narrative kind of clarifies a number of reasons that they're proposing this. Partly is that they need a 14-foot high main roof, and then the other roofs for the medical office buildings are also taller than your normal roofs for a structure, and then they have to get grades and everything to work so that their skywalks can align with their parking garage, which exists to the east. The other exception that they're requesting that applies to all the building elevations is that the guidelines require a 10-foot step back on 4th floors, and what they're proposing is 3 feet, so there will be some relief on the 3rd floor, or on the 4th floor, excuse me, and that relief is really just for this area that's shown in the lighter stucco. So it would apply on Superior Drive to this area here, and to this area on the south elevation. But that requirement's typically 10 feet. These are the other 2 elevations for the medical office building facing to the north and to the east. They also feature a variety of building materials, colors, heights, and facade articulation and relief. Neither of these elevations, however, face public streets or private drives. The elevation here on the bottom, which faces the parking garage, has less material changes, and that's really because it's facing a parking garage, but it does have plenty of glazing, and it's still finished in the same type of materials that is shown everywhere else on the building. The elevation to the north will actually face the sanitary sewer pump on Tract C, as well as the detention facility on Super Lot 1. This elevation is visible from varying degrees from Superior Drive, Creekview Way, Park 2, and US Highway 36. A 5 square foot sign bands also proposed along the top of this northern elevation at a height of approximately 55 feet. It's above the 4th floor. Signs for the medical office building stipulated in the code. The other thing I guess I didn't mention is that they're typically only located around building entrances, so their exception here would also, in addition to height, would also be that it doesn't have to be located above a building entrance. But the intent here, obviously, on the east side of this northern elevation is for this sign to be visible from afar, probably Highway 36. And then this elevation also shows where those 3 skywalks would connect with the medical office building, with a garage, excuse me. The parking garage elevations reflect a variety of building materials, colors, and heights as well, and they also use the same color palette and material palette as the proposed medical office building, so these 2 buildings will be consistent. Here on that southeast corner shows the parking entrance, and that will be a sign that you can see here actually extends out so it can be seen from the west. So people coming down Superior Drive can look down that road and actually notice that there is a parking garage, and that's where the entrance is to it. That was a request by staff as well that the applicant graciously accommodated. That kind of covers it. The height of this entrance is shown at 8 feet 2. That would accommodate the van accessible parking that's proposed for some lots or some spaces within the garage. It's also 24 feet in width and includes a 4-foot little island that'll help separate egress from ingress traffic. And then these are the other 2 elevations. The things to consider here, they have these 2 stone columns. That's kind of the main architectural features, which are nice on this building. They're also proposing sign bands on the east and north elevations at comparable heights to what we discussed for, they're not quite 55 feet. I think they're closer to 48 feet is the peak of this, so these are probably around 45 feet tall. But the only sign that's contemplated within the Superior Town design guidelines for parking garages is that entryway sign. So an exception is being requested for additional signage on these towers, which would be visible from US 36 highway as well. Again, staff is generally supportive of the overall proposal and these details, but they do require the consent of both Planning Commission and the Town Board to make these exceptions. The applicant's landscape plan is generally shown here. It illustrates the types, locations, sizes, and species proposed, which conform with species allowed by the design guidelines. Additionally, landscaping densities shown on their plan sheets generally calculate the numeric requirements correctly. A few exceptions to these requirements are requested. The applicant has proposed 139 foundation plantings, where 288 are required, and that 288 numbers based on the linear footage of the building, so it calculates all sides of the building. And clearly no landscaping is actually proposed in this walkway area. There's only 10 feet and probably not a heck of a lot of sunlight that would get there. The other thing that the design guidelines don't really contemplate are the 0-foot setbacks that are allowed by the PD. So the PD really only established a front setback along roadways, and that setback is 0 to 35 feet. The medical office building has been shown to be at roughly 0 feet here, and it goes up to somewhere between 1 foot and 2 along the northern portion of the property, but not enough to accommodate any foundation planting. So that's part of the reason and justification for the exception. The other thing that staff already kind of hinted at when we talked about the plat and the site plan is that Lot 1A, which wraps around Lot 1B here, will be required to accommodate the plantings that are required for the parking garage. One irrigation meter is shown, and we've had conversations with the applicant about it. They are aware of the condition, and they're the ones that kind of created it. There's no issue. They'll be the ones providing maintenance and upkeep for the landscaping that will screen the parking garage. And then just in general, foundation plantings are proposed along the southern elevation of the proposed office building and along the southern elevation and as well as some trees along the southern elevation of the garage. And then the more major landscaping, the bigger trees are proposed to help screen the structure. Evergreens here along the east, and then a mix of deciduous trees along the north from US 36. Staff is recommending that they actually substitute out some of the deciduous trees with some evergreen trees along the north to ensure some year-round screening of that fairly large facade. But otherwise, staff is supportive of this request, which basically, looks at the two lots as one in order to satisfy the landscaping standards. But the two lots also function more or less as one for other reasons, for parking in particular. And these detail sheets are provided to illustrate compliance with other design guidelines requirements, which clarify that on-site amenities, hardscape, and site furnishings be consistent throughout the town center. In general, staff finds these architectural details to meet applicable requirements. The proposed concrete pavers that are shown in front of the medical office building will actually help direct traffic, pedestrian foot traffic down here, and help locate that front door as well. And it just helps set the pedestrian, it basically continues that pedestrian environment from Superior Drive. Concrete's proposed along the parking garage on both sides, to the north and to the south. And that concrete treatment is consistent with what's shown on the BVI parcel to the south. The only condition that staff's really applying to this plan, or this part of the plan, is that this concrete treatment be extended to connect with the bike path, which is also concrete. So there's just a little patch of asphalt here that we'd rather not see, and we just propose, for the continuity's sake, that that concrete be continued in order to connect with that path, for the sake of wayfinding just as much as for the sake of maintenance and finishing. The other thing that this plan shows are the proposed bicycle parking areas. There's 10 spaces proposed within this walkway, and then there's 18 spaces that are accommodated as covered bike spaces, and they're shown right here. I don't think that there's anything I haven't covered yet. The final thing comes from the fire district. Staff has conditioned that the submittal be updated to reflect the conditions that were related by Rocky Mountain Fire District last week, which are generally illustrated here, in addition to the access concerns that we and requirements that we stated earlier. The fire district basically, and Bob with DSP Builders, have been working to find a solution to how these two buildings can be properly accessed fire-wise at the height that they're proposed, with minimal access to the north of the property. So basically, fire conditions state that you got to be able to have 150 feet from either a fire hydrant to run your hose around the back of the property. So what the solution generally is that this fire hydrant be located here, an additional fire hydrant be located here, and then a line be installed to run, a dry line to be installed to run to the north part of the property, and have a supply room here that holds an additional hose or fire equipment as necessary. But this is something that Bob may be able to explain better than I can. All I know is that the fire district, related concerns to their initial review, and then related to me last week on the 12th, that as this plan shows, as conditioned, they found a solution to allow this development to go forward as proposed in its general configuration. This concludes my presentation. I'm happy to answer any questions you have.
All right, thanks, Stephen.
You're welcome.
Any questions for staff?
One or two. I noticed that there's only 9 handicap parking spots. Is that correct? There's only 9 handicap?
I believe that's correct. There's 7 within the parking garage and 2 surface parking spots.
And is that standard? That seems fairly low for medical?
That meets the standards for a medical office building, but it's something that staff discussed.
Okay. And then one question I had earlier for Stephen was, I counted the lots on the surface parking lot, and there was only 27. Can you show where that 28th parking spot will be?
I can, and it's a good eye that you caught it. But so that last spot is over here in the corner, kind of next to that connection. And I would anticipate the shared parking agreement covers more detail than just the parking garage. But all we need for this FDP is to show that the 188 spaces that the medical office buildings required to have be accommodated through this FDP. We'll see a shared parking agreement that details how the other spaces are going to be used, and that's something that shared parking in general is something that the town tracks along with the developer to ensure that the whole proposal for the town center is based on shared parking. And the developer's done a very thorough job of providing a lot of on-street parking spaces, and then additional services like a parking garage will also be included throughout the town center, and we're balancing those numbers and tracking those numbers separately. But as far as this FDP application goes, it's for the medical office building, and we need to ensure that the 188 spaces that are required by code be accommodated, and that parking agreement will ensure that those are. But your simple question, or answer to your question, is that additional space is over there.
I have a question, Stephen. The building that's directly to the south of the medical office building is the Impact Sports Building?
It's the Impact Sports component of the larger Boulder Valley Ice building, correct.
And for Impact Sports, is there access, is the principal access to Impact Sports to the north of that building? So are both buildings accessing off the same parking lot, surface parking lot, or is Impact Sports accessing off of Superior Drive?
There is an access on the north side of, and Bob can correct me if I'm wrong, he's familiar with what's going on out here as well for Boulder Valley Ice, but there is an access point on the north portion of this structure. The main access to the larger building, Boulder Valley Ice building, is further to the south. So I think most folks would be accessing Boulder Valley Ice off of Superior Drive.
Okay.
I don't know that this is a public access or not. I don't know how they intend to use it.
Okay.
But it's secondary, if it's public, so.
I have a few questions regarding the height of the buildings, and then also one thing that it says, any rooftop mechanical units that can be seen from adjacent street level will be screened. My recommendation would be that all mechanical would be screened, whether it's visible from the street level or not, because as the buildings are built in town center, residential, commercial, you'll have views of those rooftop units. So my recommendation would be that you screen them no matter what elevation they are. They'd be visible from residents up on the hill that overlook the entire planned development, but that would just be my recommendation on that line. The signage on the south side of the building, I don't think the height of the sign, whether it's on the 4th floor or 2nd floor, I don't think it really matters, because it will be directly across from Impact Sports, BVI, so it's not necessarily an impact. I would say that the signage on the north facade of the building, you're looking at putting signage at the top of the north side of the building, but you're also looking at putting signage at the far end of the parking structure. And is it possible that we just go with signage at the far end of the parking structure, because it would be the most visible point from Highway 36 if that's what you're looking to accomplish, is to get maximum exposure, and that takes it off of the north end of the building itself and kind of cleans up that line. I have a couple more, but I need to review them. So if anybody else has a question,
Do you want response to that now?
Yeah, response would be great.
I think that the developer would probably be the best to respond to what their intent is with the signage on both structures.
Clay Samus with Superior Medical Investors. We could certainly look at that, and I appreciate your recommendation to maybe clean up that facade of the building. The parking structure is being conveyed to the Metro District, which we are kind of maintaining signage rights. So as long as that continues and we can utilize those towers on the parking structure, then I think we can definitely look at that, because that's the intent, is to try to get signage to the US 36.
Any other questions?
I do, another one on the bicycle access coming off of the 36 Bikeway. It kind of almost funnels a cyclist off of that and then down the street. So any cars coming into the parking structure, you wind up kind of creating some conflict there between cyclists, pedestrians, cars, and everything. Is there another access point or a way to route cyclists away from that, with the parking structure going all the way back almost to the 36 easement? I don't know if there's a way to route them around the north side of the building, but I just see that might wind up causing an issue with cyclists.
So I guess the only response I have at this point is the majority of those improvements are shown and already, I think, in place from offsite approvals. So that route just comes into this property, and we're not requiring anything other than, no parking signs in order to keep that open, and hopefully connect with this sidewalk. Technically, this isn't a bicycling area. They, would likely, be encouraged to kind of dismount as they get through this access area. But, this becomes more of a multimodal environment as far as this access road goes. There's no parking lanes or no parking signs established on each side of this. And it's fairly wide in width, so I don't know that there would be a conflict if a bicycle rode through here with a car, because it exceeds, standard travel lane width at the 26 feet that need to be paved for fire access, but it is not a designated bike lane.
So maybe, I guess my question would be access points from the 36 Bikeway further north and further south. Do we have any of those that are
There are
multiple?
some proposed. Alex could probably clarify where better, but north of this detention facility is my recollection where it actually connects in with the park.
Okay.
Is the one that's probably in closest proximity, and then more connections are planned further to the south. That bikeway actually goes around the cemetery and will be extended to the southeastern corner. So improvements are planned. They're not all part of the US 36 Bikeway. That kind of flip-flops between the Louisville side and the Superior side. But Superior, within the town center, is proposing lanes, internal lanes that kind of continue that within our side of that, our side of 36, regardless of whether or not it's technically the US 36 Bikeway or not.
Okay.
Anything else from the commissioners?
I have a question. I'm just wondering why there seems to be, for me, it seems like a significant number of changes to what was originally proposed. And has this building changed so much that, it needs to be looked at again in terms of how it related to the initial proposal? Because there's height, we're looking at height variances, we're looking at signage variances, fire issues with access for emergency personnel and things like that. And it seems like there's a significant number of changes, and I'm just wondering why.
I think the developer can kind of respond to that too. My general understanding is that the ownership issues wanted this property to be separate. There were also some design driven, preferences that they wanted a four-sided building that has windows on all sides for better office space, more leasable office space. But Bill's up and he's primed to respond to that.
Yeah, good evening. For those of you I haven't met yet, I'm Bill Jenks, Vice President of Real Estate with Ranch Capital since January. So I'm here on behalf of RC Superior as a master developer to support the project. I've been working with Clay and Bob since I first got involved with Ranch in January on this building and the design, going back and forth, and really trying to make it as close to the original submittal, that's the original rendering that's hanging in your lobby as possible. I think they've done a really good job of doing that. I don't think, I'm going to throw their architect under the bus, I don't think the elevations convey the design as well as the 3D renderings do, which I think they have a couple of over here. But from a design standpoint, I think it does a really good job of responding to the original design, both in the massing and in the materials and the way that those tall windows kind of form and march down. It's going to really respond nicely to the rest of the architecture we have planned in the rest of the development. From a height standpoint, I've done medical office before. It's really important to get those heights to be able to provide the utilities that they require. It's also really important at this corner in the front here to provide a really nice anchor for that corner, because now that it's separated from the BVI building, it wants to create, our new plaza is just catty corner to the lower left there, and so this wants to really anchor the northeast corner of that plaza with a nice tower element. That's why they've done this tower element with that hat. You'll see a rendering over here. And so obviously there's some change, and this is all brick, and I think it's going to actually feel really nice. There's obviously changes in that the building's been separated from BVI, where it used to be pushed up against the edge of BVI. I agree with Sawtooth that it's much more successful to have the building separated, so you have four-sided architecture, you have views from all of the office spaces. So I don't know, Clay, if you have anything to add to that, but.
Other than what Stephen did a good job articulating with just the massing as well, I think this is significantly. Oh, thank you. Sorry. The massing, the fact that it's no longer attached to what was, that 500 foot long building, whatever that size building is. Now that this is detached, it's that much less. And with Ranch's help and everyone involved, I think we did create some good articulation and nicer looking massing. But absolutely, the four-sided architecture was critical for the success of the medical office. I'll leave this out.
If I could, I'm Bob Kroll with DSP. The height issue. When we originally had the building attached to Impact, there was a grade difference of 5 foot. So you stepped down from Impact to the MOB by 5 foot. When we separated the building, now we went to that the southwest corner of the MOB. We had to match Superior Drive. So we lost that 5 foot. So when we went from 55 to 62, that drove a lot of it. And then also the requirement for that first floor to have the 14 foot for the imaging center. And then as the parking structures went up, and then we're looking at that 8.2 for handicap van accessibility through the whole parking structure, raise those heights a little bit. So we might be a little bit under 62, but we designed it at 62 and asked for that for the variance.
Thank you. Yeah, there's no doubt that it's a very good-looking building from what we see. I just kept asking the question in my mind, does it have to be that much different? And those answers answered that question. So there is a difference in the elevation from where you were starting off originally. Okay.
I think my concern with the variance in elevation is that I don't want to start just granting variances in elevation for the entire project, the entire development, but with this being on the eastern side and along 36, and Stephen, as you said, that behind it is the parking structure, so there's no impact to visually from that direction. I think that in this instance that it's not going to be a significant impact to the entire project or the entire development. And but I don't want to keep setting a precedent that says that the developer keeps coming back with new projects that they say, well, they gave variances on this one, we can get it through. So I just want you to understand that if we do approve and go forward with a higher variance on this specific building, that it's not something that we want to keep seeing on every single proposal.
And I'd be happy to kind of beef up my staff recommendation a bit to, I don't know that it addresses the site-specific, kind of criteria as much as it could in terms of, and when we grant any type of exception, we generally try to tie it to a certain need and a certain set of requirements so that it doesn't seem like it's, available to anybody that comes in with any set of circumstances. So I'm happy to do that.
Perfect. I do, Stephen, think that would be a good idea. I mean, before we move forward and, pass this to the board, I think that, that's a good point, having site-specific recommendations around height and things like that would make a difference for me and for not setting the precedent that Commissioner Reese spoke of.
And then one last thing from me is that on the northwest corner of the property, the electrical transformer, visibly, is that just going to be your typical standard large green electrical transformer that's out in the middle for everybody to see and for kids to hop up on, or is it going to be an enclosure or some kind of screening, whether it's landscaping or?
Well, as a developer, I'm probably I'm sensing I've got the same sentiments that you do, and we'd like to screen as much as possible those enclosures. It will be just a pad-mounted enclosure, the standard. There's a couple that are out there right now, and I don't know what the rest of Town of Superior is doing for screening those, but we will absolutely, as on the private side of things, to where we're allowed to, that Excel will allow us to put landscape screening. We'll be doing that.
Okay. Anything further? Does the developer have a presentation beyond what you've already given us?
No, but I would actually I'd like to thank Stephen, because we've been working on this project actually for a couple of years, and part of it was separating and then striking a deal with Ranch where we could move forward, and then also pricing. It's a very price-sensitive project, and then when we found that we could move forward and found that we could span, because it's very tight site too. Once we separate, as you can tell, the constraints are very tight with providing this parking structure. So it's been difficult to propose something that is as tight as this, that it works as well as it does. And when we came to the city, there was several rounds from the city of 12 to 15 pages of comments. And at first, I was stand back of it. But now I understand why we let Stephen do the presentation, because he's quite diligent, and do appreciate everything that the staff's done here. And thank you, Commissioners, for your time tonight.
Thank you.
I'm sorry, I have one more.
Fire away.
Stephen, I think, and you might be able to kind of help me out with this, but on the setbacks, we talked about vertically, but on the setbacks above the fourth floor, or at the fourth floor, the 3 foot versus the 10 foot, is that, as far as the staff recommendation, it's another one of those that we start getting into. And I'm just wondering, what did you guys already do an interior floor plan that kind of, you're trying to maximize the floor plate so you can get extra rent per square foot, but what's the reasoning behind that setback?
Jason.
Actually, that's exactly the reason for it. I mean, after we started this, we tried to maximize it. We did the floor plans, and we found out that taking that 10-foot, financially, we couldn't do it. And so that's why we inched it out, and, we worked with articulating a little bit more, bumping the towers out on the corners to at least give a little, 2 foot this way, 3 foot this way. But that's basically why we didn't get the 10-foot.
Apologize, Commissioner Reese. I didn't hear the beginning of the question. That's why my project manager answered it. But again, if we could take the building to the north or take it to the east, or if we can get square footage elsewhere, we tried. And so it was an exercise of numbers per se, because we needed to meet a certain square footage or make the project work.
I have a question to revisit the signage issue that's anticipated to the north that would be visible from 36. Is it your intention that this would be, an urgent care sign or something that would advertise the medical office building, and would it be illuminated at night? What's your intent?
I'm actually glad that you brought that up, because yes, that is the intent for branding the building. We've got a full floor tenant, and as a full floor tenant comes along, they'd like to see signage. So I think it's important there at US 36, and it will become known as that building. So it's meant for that purpose. As to the night, or the lighting at night, I know that staff had put a condition in there for a certain time period that couldn't be lit after X7, if you can help me remember that.
Yeah, it's just to meet the design guidelines, which allows for illumination during the hours of operation in general, plus 30 minutes after the building closes, and based on their hours of operation that they stated in their narrative, it would go dark at 7:30 and be lit again at 7 a.m. So
I think I'd like to ask the commissioners in the city to think about that condition and see if we can lax that as it relates to a structure that's right up against the freeway, and it's not part of the center of the community center or next to the retailers and other residential that's going up. I think it's important, and very important for this MOB anyways. So clearly, nicely lit signage, whether it's integral lit or whatnot, that would be acceptable, but I think it makes sense to be able to light it beyond 7 o'clock. So I'd like to ask if we can revisit that condition.
what do you have in mind?
Well, again, that's a traffic corridor that probably goes up until 1 o'clock. I mean, people are leaving all the time through Boulder and traveling through 36. I certainly don't need to necessarily have the lights on all evening, all night, I mean, but something definitely through traffic patterns would be the goal for me.
It's an exception that we'd have to consider, and it's something we haven't considered or discussed as a staff. And I don't know where we'd fall on, varying a illuminated sign that, I guess doesn't serve much purpose beyond the hours of operation. And it tells folks that building's there later, if they need to come. But I think the PD, I guess my initial reaction is that the design guidelines of the PD were, meant for a reason, and the visibility from, it's not a very large sign at 25 square feet, so that's not a terribly, big concern for me, but it would be visible probably across the highway too. So there are things like that to consider in making that decision.
Okay. Any further questions?
I do, and maybe this will be addressed later, but the storm drainage and the agreement that needs to be structured there, will that be part of this narrative as we move forward and give this onto the board? Will that document be available to the board at that time, or is it something that will take
it's
longer?
one of a handful of concurrent reviews that would have to be done. So all those separate easements, off-site easements, staff is conditioned to be considered by the town board the same night as their hearing, so that it ensures it gets done. That's the same thing for that encroachment agreement that's already been prepared and shared with the applicant by staff. So they'll go back and forth, or they'll agree to it, or whatever, but some form of that encroachment agreement will be agreed to and presented to, or settled on and presented to the town board for review and approval the same night as this goes forward for consideration.
Thank you.
Anything further? Okay, well, I think I know the answer to this question, but is there anyone from the audience who wishes to comment on the subject? Hearing none, applicant has an opportunity for any final parting words before we close the hearing. Okay. All right. We'll go ahead and close the public hearing. Comments? Anybody?
I think the signage requirements and everything, that's something that the board should probably consider and with town staff. I think, Stephen, you're right, to be good neighbors for those across 36, I guess it'd be westbound on 36, the signage that would be on the south side of the south or east side of the parking deck. That's definitely something that the guidelines are set up for, the 7 to 7:30 a.m., makes sense. And I think that any signage around the building that faces into our development need to adhere to those standards as well. But so I think that only leaves one sign in the direction of traffic coming from Boulder that would even be a consideration. It would be on that north corner of the parking deck, and that really just limits it. So I think that you're right in that we have the signage, the lighting times for a reason, and I think we probably should stick to those.
On that topic, Commissioner, I kind of disagree with you. The sign facing 36, it's to advertise the medical building. Do we get do you know what the sign is actually going to say? Have you determined that yet? No. Do not. Because I think the advertisement for the building as well as the town center, because I'm pretty sure the name of the building is going to have something superior in it. And so if you look across the highway, I'm not out there 24/7, but I think the hotel on the other side is lit 24 hours a day. There's a Marriott, there's a Country something in over there. I think those guys are lit 24/7. So I think the sides of the buildings that face into the town center could adhere to the time requirements, the 7 to 7 or whatever it is. But I think facing out to 36, I think it would behoove the building and the business.
For myself,
it's my
I would.
opinion.
I'm sorry.
It's my opinion.
Yeah, and for myself, I think that the tenant would matter. If it were an urgent care office that was there, for example, then maybe you'd want that light on 24/7. But for advertisement purposes, I'm not sure that we would want to go outside of what our town code is on lighting and signage. For me, it's just one more variance that we're looking at that I'm kind of having some questions about. So, urgent care,
Yeah.
absolutely. Not urgent care, I think it needs to.
I think there's a difference between urgent care and emergency care. And I'm not qualified to define that, but that's what I understand. And this is an urgent care thing, so they probably are closed after a certain time at night. They're not an emergency place that's open 24/7. Am I incorrect or correct on that?
Correct.
Yeah.
Okay, or urgent care or emergent care. I think, we would look at that.
I think to echo Fred's comment about that, you wouldn't want to advertise something that's closed. If people think, oh, it's urgent care, and then get off the highway and find out that it's closed, it doesn't really do much good. But I guess my consideration is that I'd be willing to consider the sign on a case-by-case basis, and recognizing that we can't commit to any variances beyond what's in the design guidelines, but I'd still be willing to always entertain everything on a case-by-case basis. And if it's the right proposal at the right time, and staff's on board with it, and we're on board with it, and the town's board is on board with it, then it may be the right decision. But so I wouldn't want to foreclose us from considering anything in the future, but at the same time, I wouldn't commit to doing it either. So I'd just keep an open mind going forward. But I think that generally speaking, I like the design. I like the fact that it's separated from the impact sports and Boulder Valley Ice. I think that this is going to be another nice anchor. I'm not overly concerned with an additional 7 feet of height. I think that was adequately explained here in the project narrative and the project summary. I think it makes sense, given the explanation that we received from the developer, that losing that additional amount of elevation by separating the buildings explains the need for the height. And given that the siting of this project is on the eastern portion of the town center, we don't have to worry about views being impacted. And it seems that the developer is taking steps to design a building that would anchor the eastern flank of the town center in a way that would open up into the general promenade in an appealing way. I think the materials that are proposed obviously look good, so I'd be in favor of moving forward.
Any other comments?
No, I think that if we go ahead with this resolution and we're going to allow a variance in this particular situation because it's uniquely situated or what have you, that we should perhaps add a comment or communicate some sort of a comment along with the approval to the effect that this is not to be construed as some blanket tendency toward variance. This is simply because of how things face in a particular location. And we feel that any kind of, for want of a better word, prejudice is de minimis.
Phyllis, any comments?
No, I really don't. I could go either way, it really wouldn't. But if we've got the guidelines in place, I guess I would go with the guidelines as they stand.
I guess for my part, I do think it's a beautiful building. I think it's going to be aesthetically very pleasing to have it separated from the impact sports and Boulder Valley Ice project. I think that looks very nice. I feel like the need for the variances have been adequately explained and they're understandable. I don't feel like it's a situation where the developer is asking for something that they don't really need. And we're not particularly asking for a lot, in my estimation. That said, I'm sensitive to everybody else's concerns that we don't want to be perceived as in the business of handing out variances every day, but there are exceptions to be made. It seems to me this is one of them. Maybe it's a small point, but the one thing that resonated with me was the issue that Commissioner Harden raised about the handicap parking. It seems to me like that's not a lot of spaces dedicated to wheelchair accessible parking, especially on that surface lot. It would seem like there ought to be a way to put a couple more spaces in there, given the amount of traffic, hopefully, that we're going to see with people coming and going and up and down the promenade, et cetera. Might be a real opportunity to think about putting another couple of spaces in there. Those are all the comments I had.
So along those lines, town review, like when there's a development and something goes in, is there a process for the town where you go in and review the parking at certain points to see if there's an impact or a need for more handicap parking spots, and then make that adjustment? Is that something that's part of what the town does on a annual, semi-annual basis, or do you just wait for concerned citizens to comment and ask for more parking?
I guess that's a multiple part question. How the town reviews handicap parking is based on building code. So based on the occupancy, and we did refer this to Ernie Kern, our chief building official with the town, and he confirmed that the analysis that the applicant provided is sound. Technically, I think for the square footage that they're proposing, I want to say it was 7 handicap parking spaces that were required. And you can't quote me exactly on that, but I believe it was 7, and they're proposing the 9, correct? So it's in excess of that. If this was an outpatient facility, if it was technically a hospital, it would require more spaces. So that's the first kind of cut at your questions. We wouldn't review this again necessarily. There's no like interim review. I suppose if you wanted us to, we could, but I think my general reaction would be that if the site is underparked for folks that are needing to go there, the actual property owner would have the incentive to come back and add additional handicap spaces if that's what they're finding is that they're underparked. And I don't know that, and that could always be done at a future date. You know, that's a fairly easy review and amendment to change some parking, you know, provided that the 188 spaces overall are still guaranteed. Handicap spaces do take up more space than traditional parking spaces.
That's right, it would fall on the property owner to make those adjustments if it's.
Yeah, and I would assume that
Right.
they'd have the incentive to come back and do that, but.
Okay.
Further comments?
I have just one final question for the developer. What's the time frame like on this building, and when are you expecting? When do you expect to be starting construction? When do you expect to be completing it?
Am I allowed to reverse time? Because we were hoping to start last year. We're looking to try to get foundation permits separate from, or as we're processing building permits. So literally as fast as you allow us to, assuming all approvals going forward continue with the board, and probably about a 9 to 10 month construction, 10 months construction.
Thank you.
I just have one other comment, and this might be for Stephen as well as the applicant, but or the developer. It might behoove the developer to maybe put something more formal together regarding the signage issue, and then present that again maybe to the board, because it was kind of tossed on as a sprinkle. And I don't know that it fully received the consideration that it should have. So I'd just like to throw that out.
Per the sign ordinance, we have to come back with a sign package. So ultimately, the goal here, I think, is to establish the location of signage, and I think that is important because we're approving the architecture and the materials and the concept. So I'd like us to be able to at least get finality, hopefully. At least that would be my goal, to where the location could be. And but, you know, type of lighting and how we can get creative with that to allow maybe longer term lighting, if that is going to be entertained, is certainly something you dig into when it comes to what's appropriate for us, a sign package, which will be more formal and more detailed.
To Commissioner Stewart's point, I guess I agree, you know, that it's difficult to comment on exception requests like the applicant has proposed without, you know, some additional context as to what it's actually signing, or, you know, and I guess kind of addressing it, kicking it back to the applicant, is if they're going to request, you know, if they want to request an additional allowance for hours of signage being illuminated, then staff and, you know, Planning Commission and the town board has an easier time actually responding to a specific request as to what that sign may be and what hours you're actually, you know, if it's an exception to be 24/7, that's a different exception than to extend it out to 9 p.m. or something like that. So the specificity that I think Commissioner Stewart's looking for, any additional specificity would be helpful in considering exceptions in general. So.
Further discussion?
On the west elevation of the building, where was the signage for the west elevation?
It is just above
okay, so it's
the entrance there, too.
Standard.
It's the standard other than the height. So it is identifying a building entrance, although it's technically the entrance around the corner. I think staff is supportive of some sort of sign fronting their primary street, and, you know, doesn't have a concern with an exception in this regard. There is no door here. Technically, it's under the awning, facing to the south, so.
Yeah, I agree with that. That facade. It's the north facade that's, as I said earlier, I think if we could push that back to the parking deck, that would be great to clean up the lines of the building.
So what you're suggesting is just to have the one on the north facade, or on any north facade between, and at the end of the parking garage versus
Yeah, I
the
think
medical
as
office
far as
building?
the height restriction on the north side, you know, if that sign is removed from the building facade on the north side and pushed to the parking deck, that removes the request for the variance on the building signage, and then it pushes it out to the parking deck, and it really cleans up the lines of the actual building itself. And I think that, you know, that, to me, would kind of appease the north side, and then the west side is okay with the way that is recommended. South side, because it's between the two buildings, you're not gonna really see it, it's not gonna be a huge impact from anywhere else on the properties, or the project overall plan development. But I think that was my primary concern, was that north side visible. You know, it's a large sign up high, and that's a variance, so, you know, if you remove that and push it to the parking deck, that removes that variance.
Okay.
Further comments, or are we ready to act?
I had a comment for Stephen. Through all this conversation, has there been any other conditions that you've added to the resolution?
No conditions to the resolution that I've added. Have you noted any? No.
The one I can think of is Commissioner Reese's thing about the rooftops, all of it be screened, the mechanicals, and I don't know if that's.
So, yeah, I guess if you,
I don't know, we really haven't talked
you
about it.
guys need to clarify whether or not you want to
Yeah,
make it a
right.
condition. So there's one opinion that's been kind of voiced, and if you guys want to add any conditions, we're happy to do so. I guess in response to just to add some perspective on I think he makes a very valid point about the HVAC units being potentially visible from other properties that maybe aren't even built yet at different heights. This proposal, I think, technically is going to be taller than those other buildings. What staff generally kind of aims for is to consolidate HVAC units to be as centrally located on a roof as possible, and they still need to be able to service, you know, whatever's within them. But we try to set them back as far from the building edges so that we don't have to add screens, because screens sometimes add that visual clutter that you're trying to prevent with the. It's better than a HVAC unit, but it's still something that you'd rather not see altogether. So it's basically, you know, we'll need to review what they're proposing when it comes through construction drawings and see whether or not a screen is required. But I'll be aware that we should be, you know, considerate of views beyond street level. So that's kind of how I took that direction. But if you want to make it a condition, I'd be happy to make a condition too.
It's up to you.
I don't think it needs to be a condition. I think, you know, as long as you guys are aware of that concern, I think it's appropriate, and I'll leave it to you guys to review with the next proposal.
Okay.
Okay.
Is there anything in the design guidelines about screening HVAC units?
I don't know specifically what the requirement is. I think that in general, it's best practice to try to find some screening, but you're also you're walking that balance between adding, you know, something, because the screening has to be separated a certain distance from the HVAC units for accessibility, so you're pushing what might be visible, like minimally visible, to being, it's just a careful balance to walk. So that's how I typically approach it, but I don't know if we have a specific
Well, I don't, I
requirement
can't,
in the design guidelines.
I'm not ginning up in my head what's in the design guidelines, but screening basically is when you look at, well, in the past, when you look straight on at the building, if you had a line drawing and you're not standing down the sidewalk looking up, you're looking right straight at it. the HVAC units need to be screened. But most of the time, you're on the ground, you're looking up, and if they're screened from a straight-on view, they're gonna definitely be screened when you're walking on the ground, because you're at an angle and you're looking up. So that's what we've done in the past, if we know where the HVAC units are. And at this point, with this proposal, we do not. That's the key right there. So we're gonna have to look at those as part of the construction drawings.
This is a kind of a good illustration to kind of show. So they have like these parapet walls shown
Mhm.
here where the brown stucco is, and that satisfies most of the screening. If that's set back, 15, 20 feet from the edge of the building, you're probably not going to see
Mhm.
that at all. But we can, have them provide some additional analysis and sightline views just to ensure that it gets done. Or we could probably add a condition that kind of clarifies that, if they are visible, then they do need to be screened and they come back. I don't know how, I've never done the construction part of it, so I don't know how difficult that is, or whether or not, developers would prefer to have that done through the construction phase, which is probably the case, rather than having to come back and do it. What the applicant is showing here are individual screens rather than one cohesive one, to break up, a big wall that would be required to kind of collectively encompass them all or fence them all in, so. Bob might be able to provide more clarification on.
Well, this is a subject that Stephen and I have talked about, because I do believe it's a construction issue. And placing the note on the drawings that if it's visible and it will be screened, we would follow through with that. But our first choice would be to put the units towards the center of the roof. I need to maintain 6 to 8 feet around any units for maintenance. And Stephen's absolutely correct. Sometimes you push that 6 and 8 feet out, now all of a sudden, that screen wall that goes a foot over a 4 to 5, 6 foot high unit is visible from the street when you wouldn't have seen the unit, okay? So I think it's a case by case. Obviously, we want to try to keep them to the center. I don't want to put any other features on that roof if I can possibly get away from it. I mean, I don't want to put any wind loads up there, no extra loads on that roof whatsoever. So, but I do think it has to be a construction thing, and I told Stephen that I would present those drawings, and then we'll look at it at that time. So I'll follow through on that commitment that we made.
I guess one of the positives to not having a 10-foot setback and only going to 3 feet is that it almost provides its own, the trajectory or the visual trajectory now is that it provides its own screening.
That's true, it does. And we put a parapet on here already of 2.5 to 3 feet. But that depends too on where you're on that roof with the slope of the roof. So as we design those rooftop units, we're going to look at all of those things.
Final comments? If not, go ahead, please.
I wanted to ask a point of clarification before you guys go to vote. Commissioner Reese, would I understand you correctly that the sign, we wouldn't necessarily lose the option for the sign entirely, but we would look to put that sign on the parking structure? Because it's important to have.
Right, because
that northern sign, we do have a location, but to actually add it to the parking structure, I guess, is without losing, because we feel that the three sign locations are important, is all I would want to do.
Yeah, it would be on the north side of the parking structure. Yes.
There is one already shown, so I don't know if that's the question. Are you saying that you'd want an additional one? Or?
So you would do 2 on the parking structure.
And that's maybe so the towers, it's smaller, but which I might be able to work with, but it would get what you're talking about, satisfy what you're talking about, and
well, from a
capture that
visibility
corner.
standpoint, I think it would be better for you to have it all the way out there, almost because it's the way that the parking structure sits. It's pushing all the way almost to the corner, like right on the
It's
highway.
closer, yeah.
Yeah. And so therefore, it wouldn't need to be as big as it would be on the side of the building further west. If you're pulling it right up against the highway, then your sign could be smaller and probably be more impactful.
Sure.
That's all
I
was
just
trying
wanted
to
a
say.
point of clarification that we could put it in that corner.
All right, with that, are we Ready for a motion? Does anybody care to make one?
I make a motion, Town of Superior Planning Commission Resolution Number PC-7, Series 2016. A resolution of the Planning Commission of the Town of Superior recommending approval of the final minor subdivision plat and final development plan for the Superior Medical Building and Parking Garage, Lot 1, Block 12, Superior Town Center.
Okay, we have a motion. Is there a second?
Second.
Commissioner Stewart, further discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Motion's carried. Okay.
Again, sorry to, but with the conditions that evidently that.
Yes.
Okay.
Sorry, yes.
Staff announcements?
Finally get to introduce Hillary Graham, our new attorney for Planning Commission, so welcome, and we'll be looking forward to working with her more in the future. And then I sent out an email earlier today on just the forecast, I guess, for June, which looks busy. I'm trying to consolidate the required Planning Commission meetings into 2 hearings if possible, but we may need a third. So we have residential application coming through for the town center. We have Parks project. We have McCaslin Roundabout project. Oh, well, I don't know about that, but we have a handful of projects coming through that need attention, and we're trying to get them accommodated on schedule, so we'll see what we can do.
Okay.
But I'll be in touch as soon as I can with update schedule and actual meeting requests.
All right.
All right.
Thanks, Stephen. Further business? Hearing none. We're adjourned. Thanks, everyone.